Hello and welcome to Pills in a Pod, a podcast where we feature healthcare leaders, change makers, and game changers. My name is Ali Merchant. I'm the co-founder and director of Synapse. Today's episode is very special. Today we have none other than Rehan Khan. Rehan Khan, Managing Director of MSD in India, with over 2 decades of experience in the healthcare industry. He has held significant leadership roles across the Asia-Pacific region. Before joining MSD, Rehan was the Managing Director of Abbott in India. An entrepreneur by heart, Rehan founded First Penguin Capital, an early-stage fund dedicated to investing in health and consumer tech startups. He's been a board member and advisor to several impact-driven private equity funds and healthcare companies across Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. Academically, Rehan is a graduate of Harvard Business School and Drexel University. But for me, Rehan is a friend, and I look up to him like Ekalavya looks up to Dronacharya. A little about that and more about today's episode in Pills in a Pod. Again, a podcast where we talk to healthcare leaders, game changers, and change makers about their ideas, insight, the industry, and we try and find inspiration in their lives. Hi Rehan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me.
So Rehan, let's start. Early life, career, beginnings. What was childhood like? What were the early influences that shaped you?
So I was born in family of academics. Pretty much our family business is academia.
Okay.
My parents, my cousins, my mom's brothers, sisters, everybody was in some sort of academics. I was born in England, but I grew up in a town called Aligarh, where you have Aligarh Muslim University. My parents taught at the university their whole lives, and everyone I know basically did that.
Okay.
So I grew up in a college university campus in government housing, and a wonderful place to grow up. I mean, ecosystem which is all about curiosity, about books, about thoughts, about ideas, and somewhat protected from, as all universities are lives into themselves, cities into themselves, protected from mainstream cities. So BHU, DU, Aligarh University, many of these universities are like that all over the world, not just in India. So yeah, that's kind of where I grew up, and then kind of my parents spent some time in North Africa, in Libya for about 4 years, in Yemen. So certainly, that experience in early life really changed me, because we had next door neighbors who were Egyptians. We used to go to my parents' friends who were Syrians for lunch or dinner. We used to hang out at their house. I remember we had an Egyptian neighbor right in front of us who used to have crabs every day for dinner. In India, I'd never heard of crabs before, growing up in North India. So I think that was really quite an instrumental phase in our lives, my sister and I, living in North Africa and in Yemen, in Aden, which had tremendous international populations. I got a scholarship to go to an American boarding school in North India, in Missouri, called Woodstock School. And that kind of, at least for me, fundamentally changed my view of how I saw things, because Woodstock had 60 nationalities, many multiple languages, number of kind of education systems. There was CBSE, there was the British A-level system, there was the American system, now they have IB as well. So it was a very different environment 35 years ago to grow up in, and especially in Missouri, which was again a little bit of a bubble in the middle of nowhere. Obviously, my parents played an important role, but my parents' siblings played an important role as well, because they helped me certainly leave India and go to university abroad in the US, which again, if you were in the 80s and early 90s from a middle class family, that's almost impossible to think of. And we had a joke when I was an undergrad. I went to University of Wisconsin in Madison for undergrad, and we had a joke that all the fellow Indians who were there, we used to call them brand name Indians, because their names were on billboards.
Yeah.
The rest of us were like regular people. So I think that was a huge lottery in life.
Yeah.
Good luck, chance, that enabled many other things in life later on. Yeah. So that's kind of a childhood and academic culture about ideas and books, and then most of my life from then on played out. A decade in the US, a decade in Europe, and then I came back to India in 2008.
I can only imagine the dinner time conversations you would have. I mean, such kind of intellect all around you.
Most of the conversation was about, actually, for my parents, their mission was to help patients. I'm sure you're aware of this, but most of our audience may be aware. But in academic centers, doctors practice as physicians. They have OPDs and stuff, but they teach as well. Now, they have a non-practicing allowance. So most of their lives really are driven by not practicing for money. It's really practicing for service.
Yes, yes.
And large part of what they do, I think in all of my father's practicing life, he's an orthopedic surgeon, there wasn't Monday to Sunday when patients were not at home. And 100% of that was free throughout his career. But most of the doctors in that generation did not think of medicine as a profit-making enterprise. It was like, look, I have a salary, university employs me, and my job is to serve. So I think that was the one very clear message. And often I'd hear dialogue between my parents. My mother was a cytopathologist with a focus in oncology, oncological tumors. This dialogue around what happened to Fana patient, what happened to that patient, where's their life going, what's going on, and anecdotes about that. So that was most of the anecdote, and it wasn't that intellectual. It was more about service.
Yeah.
And I would say the second part of my life, there was a wonderful, parent of a friend of mine, Pawan Agarwal. His father was educated in the West. He grew up went to undergrad in the West. He went to Wharton. He lived in Latin America, and he was an entrepreneur, Mr. Vinay Agarwal, in Aligarh. And he really influenced me just by observation. I never had the confidence to talk to him, but by observation of what a life could be outside of being an academic. Because his life was US back to Aligarh, and he was running a large enterprise. And I thought, hey, this guy's really worldly wise. He's worked all over the world. I know he had worked in Latin America, he lived in Philadelphia. And that kind of became a little bit of a template to say, hey, I could do this, but yet do it in an area where I could be of service or work in industry which does service. So, therefore, not there's anything wrong with that, but selling sugared water or biscuits or whatever was of no interest to me.
Yes.
What was of interest in a sector where one could serve, customers or patients.
It's interesting because, I never met my grandfather, but he was a doctor, and my dad tells me that he used to take 1 anna, which is like 25 paisa or something like that, for meeting patients. And if he would feel somebody is really needy, he would give him an orange instead of taking money from him, that just get better. That was the kind of doctors that we've grown up to see. And I'm happy to say that even in my life I have met doctors who are very, very interesting. They don't like to talk numbers, they just want to talk service, and it's nice to meet people like that. And then you eventually went to Harvard, you went to MIT, you went to Drexel, and what were those years like? I mean, that's like a dream for any Indian boy, right?
But look, I didn't think of it that way, because you get to the US and suddenly you realize that entire country was built on the promise of hard work, on the promise of merit, and as Indians we have a massive advantage. Many cultures have massive advantages, Koreans and many others, but as Indians we have massive advantage because A, we speak English, B, we are pretty resilient, we are used to difference in India, and we're used to living in a secular culture, so we're used to adjusting and working with people from all over the country. And you get to the US and suddenly you realize there are no barriers. Work hard, follow the rules, and you'll be successful. And I think that promise of the US, and obviously that has changed, and my own concept of merit has changed. But at that age, the US was really, to me at least, it felt like every morning I woke up, I thought, man, I've hit the lottery. I'm lucky to be here. And that's what the US was. For example, my graduate school was 100% on scholarship.
Wow.
Even Harvard and MIT, eventually somebody funded it. So that opportunity, the US taxpayer essentially funding the education of foreigners, was really a massive generosity for America to do for decades. And I think the subsequently university that I went to was more driven by, okay, look, there's an opportunity, let's see if I could go and do something with it. And so therefore Drexel was more, look, I got a full scholar to go to business school, and that's an easy way for us to end up in a hiring hall. And subsequently after that I ended up joining private equity. But Harvard and MIT was more driven by, was a joint program between Harvard Medical School and MIT, and it was more driven by just learning a little bit about science and patient care. And it was a joint program for a year and a half, a little over a year, I thought it was an interesting program to go learn about things that I had, I worked in healthcare by that time, but I had no exposure to academically. So
I appreciate their humility, but I'm sure it was mind blowing to kind of be there every day.
But it is a lot. These things are all. I mean, often we pay an over amount of attention to the individual achieving stuff, right? But look, at least in my life, I've seen that one stands on the shoulders of many giants. There could be your parents, they could be your parents' friends, they could be your colleagues, they could be, certainly it's true for any company you work in. It's not that you are individually successful, you're successful as a team. Someone once said that, you dream alone is just a dream. You dream together, it's a reality.
Yeah.
So I think to me this is about, learning from others and hopefully getting lucky and working hard.
So then finally with your parents and all that came to a full circle. Something got you into healthcare. What inspired you? Was it a defining moment or did it just lead you there?
I would say, I wish I could tell you it was very strategic. I could tell you that I thought about it a lot and there was a ton of analysis. And, I stumbled into it. I was a consultant. I was in the US for about 10 years and then I moved to London as a consultant. I started working with Anderson Consulting, which became Accenture. And most of the work I did, most of the clients I had were not in healthcare. I had one client in healthcare for a year in Sweden. But most of the other clients were on the continent in other areas. I liked products, so it was not all healthcare. But I was trying to make a choice by my early 30s to say, hey, do I stay in consulting for at least and try to become a partner? Or do I do something else? And my sense was, in consulting you either leave when you become a manager, engage a manager or something, or you stay till hopefully you are your partner. And at that stage of being a manager, I thought, well, could I do something else? And I explored a few things. I went to talk to an investment bank. I went to talk to a credit card company. Financial services. I obviously talked to a few healthcare companies. And I had a phenomenal opportunity with Novartis where they were building their digital team, the early days of digital, 2001-2.
Wow, that's really...
Yeah, it was phenomenal. It was like early days of websites and thinking of digital. And I jumped into doing digital marketing with Novartis in Basel. I'd never heard of Basel, to be honest with you, before. I'd never been to Basel. But yeah, I ended up spending 5 years with Novartis, and that's how I got into pharma. And that was headquarters, so a very different type of job than one does in Asia or in an emerging market.
Yeah, 2000, 2001 was a time when the entire .com boom was happening and every single hoarding in Bombay or India or probably the world had one website on it and everybody was thinking that's going to be the next big thing. But digital marketing was not, nobody knew how to monetize that. Right. People are just making websites wondering that where is this going, we don't know, but this is the right place to be. And I think, because even I started my career in websites, so I remember those early days, very exciting to be in that place.
And large part of it was also experimentation. And I think certainly my learning out of doing that was, and I had a boss at the time who was also a former consultant, who by the way now runs a biotech company in the Middle East. Phenomenal guy, learned many things from him. And he said to me, look, we don't know the answer. We had a pool of money from the parent. Let's test out 3-4 different models in a set of countries where you can monetize this. So we spent a lot of time in the US, top 5 Europe, Japan. Those are the markets we focused on. And I didn't actually ever come to Asia till my next role, which was for Voltron as a global brand manager. Voltron, diclofenac, potassium, sodium, that business. But I think digital is how I got into the pharma industry.
Interesting. Yeah. And then you went across major healthcare companies. Obviously you went to Novartis, then you went to AstraZeneca, Abbott, now MSD. But I want to go back to your first job. What did it teach you? Your first job is always very special. Obviously where we've reached in life and all that is amazing. But first jobs are always special, right? Like first girlfriends.
So my first job was, I had a very simple formula. The first job, how do I stay in the US? That's it. I didn't know which sector I wanted to work in. So I did what the hordes do. Right, with what the message you get in business school, which is to go to financial services.
Yes.
Was my heart in it? Not really. I didn't know anything about financial services, so I went to a bank. I went to a hedge fund, D. Shaw, I think it was called at the time, and then I went to a couple of PE funds. And I didn't really honestly understand what private equity did. But when I went to this particular PE fund, it was a very small fund. And this was a bunch of friends who had gotten together, young, all below 35. They raised some money. And their model was, we'll buy a company that's struggling and we'll turn it around. And we'll hire a bunch of people, hopefully smart people, and we'll work with them and we'll turn this company around. And so my first job was with this small fund, less than $50 million. And they have bought a dermatology-focused cosmetics company. The interesting thing in a company that's less than $10 million in sales is you get to do everything.
True.
So you get to do warehousing, shipping, partnerships, third-party manufacturing, going to the third-party manufacturer, labeling, marketing, customer service. You get involved in everything. And in a very small microcosm, and the guy who used to run our fund did a very smart thing. He basically leased an office where the portfolio company was on the ground floor.
Okay.
And we were on the first floor. Okay. So you went down 20 times to the portfolio company. And once, because my job, first thing he said to me is, look, you can work on deals, that's fun. But the real success for us will be this first company we bought and turn it around. And we show a profit in a negative EBITDA company. And understanding that, on the ground to say, hey, look, if I lowered the returns, not me as an individual, but as a team, we lowered the returns, we can actually, that goes directly down the profit line. So little things, operational changes can make a big difference in your profit and actually the future, the health of this company. So that was the first year. And it was like, again, what can I say? I got a job. I got to stay in the US. I got what was then, H1, which was much easier to get than today. And I lived in Baltimore, which is, kind of old industrial city, lovely city, wonderful city. If you guys have seen The Wire, you would have seen Baltimore in it. We obviously went to New York quite a lot because that's where the big investors were, and that's where a lot of the conferences, etc., took place for our sector. We also had in upstate New York a third-party manufacturing plant where I spent quite a lot of time. So that was my first job, kind of a private equity fund, but working really in portfolio operations.
Did that company turn around?
It actually did turn around. I was there for about 2 years before I left.
Okay.
It turned around, I think did quite well. But the guy I used to work for was a phenomenal guy, very hands-on, very confident. I was in my mid-20s. Most of the people I dealt with were my current age, in their mid-50s. So he would tell me all the time, don't get intimidated. You're learning, keep an open mind, learn from everyone, but have your point of view and don't get intimidated. And he taught me, many lessons. And what a wonderful opportunity to work in an environment which was, 10 people trying to achieve something bigger than themselves.
I think that's very interesting, right? I mean, how people we meet in our lives shape us, and the quality of people we meet and the more we network, I mean, that actually builds us and builds our character, builds personality, builds ourselves makes us a much better person, right? I mean, I firmly believe in that. And then you turned around. I mean, you kind of built and led teams across different geographies. I mean, you were the inspiration to many people across Europe, Middle East, etc. How did that shape your leadership style now?
Look, again, I didn't think of it in such a structured way. Most of, when I left the US, I felt that I had 9 or 10 years in the US now. What else can I do? And, kind of the answer from a lot of my friends at the time was, you're leaving. You don't have a green card. You don't have a US passport. Why are you leaving the country? At least stay and get your green card. But the process was long, and I had a couple of opportunities in Europe. And I thought, look, it'll be so exciting to live in London, which is where most of these opportunities were. Mostly because of my passport, because I was born in the UK, so therefore I didn't have a passport, so I got sent obviously to the UK office. And then suddenly moving from a small town, Baltimore, to a global city, London, which I would say is probably the most exciting city in the world, was again another lottery. And an opportunity to work in consulting, which has a very different type of colleagues, very different type of thinking. The skill set you learn in consulting, analysis, communication, thinking through problem solving, working with really sharp people, working across the continent. So, in 3-4 years of consulting, it was amazing. I had an opportunity to work in the UK, of course, but in Sweden, in Holland, in France, and it was amazing. It was just like, in that sense, consulting was a great place to learn broad skills.
Now, in these various organizations that you led and you currently lead also, what are some of the key initiatives you're really proud of, which you have started and you're currently running and stuff like that?
So I think in any product-based companies that we work with, that I've worked with, I think there are 3 large themes that I can think of in my own experience, in my own life. One is, the most important one, is around people and culture. is around talent and culture. That's a massive important theme. We can talk a little bit more about that. The second is about whatever product you've got, how do you really convey the strengths of that product and differentiate it in the market against competitors.
Absolutely.
And then have a very strong results orientation to actually beat the market 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Right?
Correct.
So I think that results orientation is really important. And I think the third piece is how do you make an impact?
Yes.
Not just financially, the top and bottom line, but how do you make an impact in the environment, patient access? How do you make an impact with your partners? How do you make an impact actually in terms of that disease area or the therapy area? Could be vaccines, could be oncology, could be any other disease area. So this is most of my career has been in healthcare. Large part of that impact has been around patient access. And especially in a country like India, like us, where it's a very, very broad population that you can serve, and you can continue to serve for a long period of time, and you can improve and increase
Absolutely.
your access program in different ways. So those last three things.
Yeah. This Basel to India, how did that happen? I mean, were you ready for that?
So look, again, it was strategic in the sense that I always wanted to come to an emerging market. The second was I got a chance to work with diclofenac, with Voltaren.
Yeah.
And come to India for work. So I used to come to Novartis, to Worley, work the market all around India. That's the first time in 2003 or 4 I started doing that. And then I started to think, look, now I've spent almost a decade in Europe. What's next? And what's interesting is, I had a Chinese colleague who's now lives in Shanghai. Both of us would go back to our bosses and say, hey, send us to an emerging market. I would tell my boss to send me to India. And she would say, well, send me to China. And it was hard because when you spend most of your career and your education and have never worked in an emerging market, the natural answer of any your manager is, hey, you have no experience there. Correct. Why should I send you there?
Yes.
Go to Portugal. I don't know, go to Spain, go somewhere else. But we were very keen to do it, and I had an opportunity through AstraZeneca, which is what got me here as a BUD for oncology and critical care. But initially when I came, if I'm completely honest, I thought I'd just come for a 2-year rubber stamp. Emerging markets rubber stamp, and then I'll go back, right, to headquarters. But then, after the first year was difficult, very challenging. India is not a simple market to work in. A lot of things are thrown at you. It's highly fragmented. I don't need to tell your audience that story. I think everyone, the audience is mostly
Absolutely.
Indian, right? That first year is hard, but when you get past the wall, it's like running a marathon. You get past that wall.
Yeah.
That second year was a little bit better, and I started really enjoy it. And when my time came at the end of that second year to leave, and I had an opportunity to move to Dubai at the time, I thought, I'm really loving it. What do I do? How do I stay here? And I had a tremendous opportunity with Abbott Nutrition at the time, because the leadership of that division were looking to really scale it in India. It was a small division at the time, 120 people in the field, and we had an opportunity to really build that business. And the parent company acted almost like a fund. They gave us, quite a lot of money. We went and tried to do an acquisition of Wokhard Nutrition at the time. But then when that did not work, we went ahead and organically hired 700-800 people. We had launched some products, but launched others, and really started to build that business. And I had never recruited a leadership team. I was in my late 30s. I had never recruited an entire leadership team. So worked with my boss to really recruit that leadership team and built that team. And then suddenly as a business, we did really well. We went like 5-6 times sales. We built the distribution like 10 times. And that business did so well that I had another opportunity, again, with the support of my boss at the time, to run another business, which was quite a bit larger. I think it was $275 million at the time, which was the public listed company,
Yes.
Abbott India Limited.
Yeah.
And again, that model of thinking through talent and culture, your product and differentiation and branding, and then how do you drive impact?
Yeah.
I think that model really fleshed out in Abbott India, because it was a large business. It had a proprietary manufacturing plant. It had 35 third-party manufacturers. It had like 100 brands. Had 3,500 or 3,000 people plus contractors. So it was kind of large business with a big footprint.
Yeah.
And as a leadership team, we got to test a lot of things and do a lot of things and have a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, that's when I heard of brand Rehan Khan, where everybody was talking about you. And the person to meet Rehan Khan, that was because of the Abbott Nutrition business that you built over here. And those brands really became big over here in India.
Well, look, so I'll make a statement about it, but it's not about me as an individual.
Yeah.
We had a very strong leadership team in Abbott Nutrition. Many of them have gone on in the industry and done very well. Similarly for Abbott Nutrition, Abbott Pharma, and similarly for MSD. We have an exceptional leadership team here. Very different in experiences, different ages,
Yes.
different backgrounds.
Yeah.
But as a team, we are trying to make an impact, not just for our business, but also for patients. And I think that to me is the crux of that first point you talked about.
Yeah.
Because you can have many smart individuals, 8, 10, 15 of them,
Yeah.
who are all individually really bright. But how do you together build a culture and a team? And the culture is not just for your leadership team, it's also for your rest of your business.
Yeah.
And how do you make an impact and how you have fun?
True, true.
Nobody wants to work in a boring culture.
Yeah.
And I think in that sense, to me, the impact in all these businesses, the credit goes to that leadership team.
True.
At that time. And the impact they made, and I'm obviously a member of that team. But I don't personally believe that whole hero myth that one person comes in, they make a big impact, they write on a white shirt, none of that stuff. I don't buy that, and because in my own life and career, I've seen that it's people together that dream together to do stuff that's impactful. So.
No, well said, absolutely. Do you want to elaborate a little more on that, the part that you spoke about brands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how do you differentiate that? What is your key mantra around that?
So look, I think generally, and this is a motherhood statement that perhaps your audience would roll their eyes at, but in the market, you look by category in healthcare in India, look at any category pretty much. The room to grow in that category is pretty significant. So the first thing is, most of us in most categories don't have to do such a hard market share fight as we do in much more developed markets. In a market like ours, you take any category, well, let's take a category from many years ago and then I'll talk about another one. Let's take health food drinks, where Pediasure was in.
Yes.
Health food drinks was almost at the time nearly $1 billion category.
Correct.
Horlicks was the number one player. There was Bournvita, there was others. So what does a Pediasure do, which was like $6-7 million?
Yeah.
So you have to say, in that large category, how do I start to shape that category?
Yeah.
And we start to shape it with science. We start to shape it with nutritional, clinical information. We start to shape it with consumer activation programs, trade, partnerships. So we combine the best of science, ethical, with trade, with consumer marketing, right? And once you do that, your competition is not doing that. Your competition is differentiating with Shah Rukh Khan.
Yeah.
And that can only take you so far
Yeah.
in a category where parents want to have a product that makes an impact in the lives of the kids.
Absolutely.
So my point is that, as a team, we start to look at brands and categories and say, well, how we're going to shape them and how we're going to direct them and how we're going to really build something that grows 2, 3, 4, 5 times the market.
Correct.
I think that business, now if I remember the numbers correctly, I think that business was growing 50 to 60% a year on year.
Yeah, true.
And the way that happened was not just throwing a lot of money at it, but actually doing category shaping in a pretty creative way.
And that's the impact you talk about, right? Eventually, that's the impact you want to create. That it's not just impact on the company and the brand and the profits, but impact to real people, real lives, and mothers and children.
I think in that category, you're actually saying, look, I used to go talk to a lot of mothers around the country, and you realize that one realization, the penny dropped for me, I think, in my first year there, is that sometimes people were paying 10-12% of their salary for that brand.
Oh.
Meaning, if you're earning 10 or 15,000 rupees a month, if you're spending 1,500 rupees, then people are taking this product seriously, and the product is making an impact. So if the proof of the pudding was not there, they would not do it. Similarly, if I look at other aspects of healthcare, for example, vaccination, HPV vaccination, if I talk about that category, for example, all of it is about how do you educate many more patients about what's going on with HPV, the link to cervical cancer, and why vaccination is important. So I think that category shaping in a market like ours is really important. You have to do it creatively. People have to remember it. It has to be differentiated, and it has to be consistent. Because you can do that for 3 months, and then you don't do it for another 9 months, then you won't make an impact. And sometimes one makes mistakes, and those mistakes turn out to be kind of kind of benefit or a big lottery in disguise. One year I know we made a mistake where the category in health food drinks went dark, which goes dark in November, December. I think it goes out, dark in December. And we made an inordinate amount of investment in December. By chance, because we had some money left over in ATM,
Happens,
in TV advertising. And it just exploded in first, second quarters. So I think sometimes, so therefore the second piece of that is continue experimenting. Many of those times we fail, but a couple of times we hit it. Therefore experimentation, partnering with people who do things better than us. That could be digital companies, that could be distribution, that could be marketing partners, that could be partners who have a much better footprint in the market. All that stuff I think is really important.
That's nice.
You can't do it yourself, in other words.
And Rehan, you said you go and meet mothers. Now, I've seen your LinkedIn. I know that you even go to retailers, you go to distributors, you go to doctors, you actually go on the field. Is that part of your agenda, or is it a passion? Or?
Well, look, I don't do enough of it. I think from an aspiration point of view, I should do 3-4 times of that. Not just me, everyone else should do it. Ultimately, we serve patients of whatever type. We serve doctors, retailers, distributors. We must go work and understand our ecosystem. Ecosystems don't remain static.
Yeah.
Therefore, all of us in many multinationals, in many other companies, we have to be a lot more outward facing, market facing. That's the first thing. So here at MSD we have a program called Chalo Bazaar, where our entire head office team gets out in the market. All 140 people or so, they work the market just once or twice a year to understand how they support the people who really bring in the revenues.
True.
And how they support the entire ecosystem. How do they support patients? How do they support doctors? How do they make an impact by doing their job in supporting people better, and also in understanding what's going on in the market. Now, the folks who are at the coalface, our field teams, the marketing teams, as much as possible, we should try to get out there. Now, that's the commercial part. There's obviously the regulatory part, the government part. That piece is also important, the partners. So, in all honesty, I should do 3-4 more times of it. I mean, I'm probably doing 25% of what I should be doing.
But since you're talking about how the industry is changing and things like that, obviously we're seeing a lot of AI now. Everybody's talking about digital health. The regulations are changing. What kind of opportunities are you seeing? What kind of challenges are you seeing? What is the buzz at the leadership level?
Look, there's the buzz and there's the buzzwords and there is all whatever the shiny hot toys are. Then there is actually, my sense is, a sense of understanding. In reality, most of us don't understand machine language or AI, stuff we see on TV or we read about it. I've tried, all of us, as I'm sure everyone has tried DeepSeek. I've tried ChatGPT. And I use it occasionally for questions and stuff that I'm searching for. I just tried Grok yesterday. So many of these things are very useful. We obviously have a program to engage with, with social media. We do a lot of work on social media. Certainly around machine language, AI, I think many changes will come. By and large, on the commercial side in India, I think it'll be an assisted tool. I think India is still a very high-touch culture. Therefore, our field teams are very important and play an important role. Doctors still work in strong partnership with us around education and science. And there's very strong, stringent rules and regulations, both our internal rules and also the government's. And I think that helps to build a much more equitable and a fair and balanced and a compliant ecosystem. So I think, yes, there's a lot of stuff happening, but it will take some time for us to decipher it and to use it much more effectively than what it is today. Therefore, the question comes back to the origin. Where can we experiment and learn from it? So there's lots of places that one can experiment and learn from these new technologies that are coming in.
So the thing is, let's all be in exploratory mode right now. Let's try and still explore and see where this is going. And then maybe we'll find a way. One of us will find a way to crack this a little better.
Look, I'm not sure if there's one obvious answer. In certain therapy areas or categories, for example, dermatology, digital health makes a lot of difference. Cure skin, and there are other people who are doing this better. In other areas, it is an assisted tool. For example, your doctor may follow up with you, etc. In an area like retail, you may get your prescription electronically, which is all par for the course. Is there one magic silver bullet that's going to change the industry as a whole?
Tell us.
Today, no.
Oh, God.
I don't know. If you know one, please tell me. But I don't know one yet. At least in this part of the world, in the emerging market.
Yeah. But building brands is still, passion point, I'm sure, So what has been your approach to building strong brands and that, these brands that resonate with doctors, patients? I know you mentioned Pediasure, I know you mentioned cervical cancer, but is there like a approach that you have to building strong brands?
Look, I think I'll go back to what I originally said. Building a great brand or a category beyond the brand, just shaping the category, comes with the right skill sets, the right type of people. And sometimes in the pharma industry, at least in India, we don't have those skill sets. Those skill sets really sit in telecoms, they sit in FMCG, sometimes they even sit in consulting. So the objective is first to build a team, not just at the leadership team level, but beyond that, who have those skill sets. That's first. You have to have those skill sets to build it. Second, you have to have insight about your category or brand. That is not 1 + 1 = 2. In other words, going to market is part of that. Looking at research is part of that. Looking at data is part of that. The data you have internally. Talking to lots of people in and outside your ecosystem is part of that. Talking obviously to your customers is part of that. But you have to build a picture to say, hey, how do I really shape that category? And then you have the right skill set, whatever insight, market research that you need to do, and then you implement. But the objective has to be very clear. That what is the end game that we're going for? Whether that could be a market share points, or that could be, how you're differentiating your brand. That could be growth. That could be all of the above. But to me, it starts with people, the right team, the right culture, the right skill sets, and then really looking at that category and shaping that category. Now, this is again a broad motherhood statement, but all of this is, how people talk about hyper-local. This is super specific to the category you're working in. And I really, as a former consultant, I really believe in first principles. Most of these things with the right skill set and team you can solve. And I think that we have demonstrated as a team across the board, across categories, in branded generics, in FMCG or nutrition, in patented pharma. All of those as a team we have demonstrated multiple times.
I mean, there are 50,000 pharma brands. I mean, differentiating one brand, making that one winner, getting into the top 300. That's like a lottery in many ways also. But I'm sure what you're saying is right. I mean, if you fulfill all those pillars of team, culture, insight, talking to customers, getting it right, tactically getting it right, hyper-local, I think then it all puts together as...
Well, you also have to have a great product.
Yes.
I mean, great science, great product. We're lucky to get products, for example, at MSD, that are phenomenal. They're best in the world in their category. And patients all over the world have experienced them. Millions of patients have experienced them. So by the time when they get to our market, these are tried and tested, and doctors trust them, and they trust our overall brand. So that really helps you. Again, you're standing on the shoulders of many giants. So that helps you a lot.
But now when you're handling big brands, you're also handling high stakes situations, especially when it comes to patient care, business growth. What is it that Rehan thinks when he's making such kind of decisions, which could be this way or that way?
So to answer that question, I will go back to saying it's not an individual decision. We have a team. We have very strong compliance norms. The government has very strong compliance norms around many areas. We have laws. So decision making becomes easier when you're clear about your value system. And your focus on patients, respect for others, making sure you have a strong compliant culture. Then it becomes very easy to make a decision. Now, obviously, in a market like ours, there are no obvious answers. So therefore, what I found that, especially for first year, second year general managers, you get smarter and better the more you interact with the outside ecosystem. You obviously have to know your core, what you are, and your compliance, culture, and your code. But what is also equally important is to understand the market and to have relationships in the market, which is one thing we haven't talked about in this podcast, is relationships. I mean, we are a highly relationship-driven culture, high-touch relationship-driven culture. And that's not just true of India, that's true of many places in the world. But, the places I've worked at, Southeast Asia, China, in India now, relationships make a difference. So often, your network you can lean on people to get answers sometimes where there is no real answer. You don't have the data for it. But that gets sharper and better every year that you operate in this market. And obviously, many times one fails and one makes mistakes, and hopefully that's a genuine mistake and one learns from it.
But I like that you said relationships, because even in our business, the agency business, while creative is one thing, strategy is one thing, tactics is one thing, customer response is one thing, we always feel likability is a very important thing. You know, if you're likable, people like working with you, and that's something even I tell my team, that be likable. People will work with you a little more often.
Yeah, I mean, I had an experience many years ago. There was a particular family office here in Maharashtra that owned about 2% of Abbott India. And the owner of the family office reached out to me one time. They had a large family office, and they said, "Hey, would you come and spend some time with us?" And I'm not really sure what they wanted to, but since they own 2% of the company, I thought it'd be nice to go meet them. And I went and spent a day with them. And the lesson I learned from this patriarch of this family office, he had built many different multi-billion-dollar companies across categories. I think he had built a fertilizer company, he had built an ink company, he was working on a medical devices business.
I know.
So I'm not gonna mention him.
I know who.
But hugely impressive person.
Yeah.
And he left me with a message, which was a lesson, not just for that day, but for the rest of one's life. And he said, always leave goodwill on the table with anybody you work with. That could be your colleagues, that could be your boss, that could be your partners outside. Leave goodwill on the table. What did he mean by that? That means, every interaction all of us have, we leave a little bit of goodness on the table, and it's a bank, and we'll, hopefully our relationships get better and gets built, and we work on that. I thought it was a tremendous lesson to spend a day with one of the biggest entrepreneurs in this country and learn from him.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah. We'll not mention him, but he told me something very nice. He said whenever we're making something, he said "Gauti saru and gauti sastu," which means better than the rest of the village and cheaper than the rest of the village. That is how you should make products, Right. And very interesting conversation, and hopefully I'll feature him on the podcast very soon. Rehan, you deal with obviously a lot of leadership, but you also deal with a lot of young talent, young professionals. What advice would you give them for their professional, personal, and relationships? The overall, what advice do you normally give them?
So look, 2 or 3 things. One, we're lucky to live in a country where we're the youngest country in the world. Our average age, I think, is 28. Right?
Yeah.
So we're going to be young for a while, and this young population in India will make a massive impact and build a very different India than existed before.
True.
So lucky to work here, lucky to work with many of those folks. We have a structured program that's worked now for 15 years. It also is at MSD. And this program basically takes folks who did well in university, then they work in consulting, then they come work with us for 2 years. And we've had about over 50 people go through it in the last 15 years. And our track record in terms of placing these folks all end up going to university, to business school afterwards. We have like a 98% placement into Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Wharton. A couple of people have gone to Cambridge and University of Chicago and other places. But by and large, this program has become very successful. And what's really interesting about this program, and this is when I've gotten an opportunity to really work with many of these people. In fact, one of the people in that program now runs our oncology business here.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's come full cycle. The interesting of the program is, one, to learn from these super successful, very bright people. Really privileged to learn from them because they think very differently. Their basis, their assumptions are very different, and the way they look at a problem is very different. So one is, I don't think I'm qualified to give anybody any advice, right? Certainly, my wife will tell you that. But so we're not qualified to give any advice. But
nobody is qualified to give their wife advice.
Correct. Or anybody anybody advice. But to say, look, one, it's really not just us as a leadership team, but for the broader system to learn from these folks. 2, I think couple of suggestions I would say, just one line I would say to anybody starting on their career is to focus on your strengths.
True.
School tests for weaknesses.
Yeah.
Life tests for strengths. So focus on your strengths. One can spend a whole lifetime trying to, make your weaknesses into strengths, and no one has enough time. Focus on one's strengths and avoid any derailers, and do the right thing. Right.
Yeah.
So that's it. I mean, that's kind of my suggestion. I wouldn't call it advice.
Sure. Okay, great. Rehan, what's your lucky number?
I don't have a lucky number.
Oh, you don't.
But I don't have a lucky number. But look, I'm influenced by an old boss who was Chinese. So the number 8, which is the number for money in Mandarin or in China, That number is a number. I had an old Chinese boss, so that always I think of when I think of a number, I think of the number 8.
It's funny because we have another episode where the 8 is connecting, so I'll come back to that one later. But Rehan, can you give us 5 lessons that one can learn from your life, your work, your relationships, and everything around it?
So look, rather than I would say learn from my own life, which is just one person, I would say I'll just share with you what I have learned.
Sure.
From learning from my bosses, from my peers, from many of these young team members, from the overall team, and just learning in life. And I think the first lesson, probably the most important lesson that at least I've learned, right from whether when I was in Aligarh or the US or across Europe or anywhere else, is respect everyone. Don't respect with hierarchy, right? So to me, the people who respect the junior most person in the company, the same, they treat them the same way as they treat their boss, that person is worthy of respect.
True.
And large part of that, one's character is if you do something for someone who cannot do anything for you, that really is a measure of your character. So the first thing to me is, the first lesson I've learned is respect everyone. The second one, which, obviously having grown up in a university system as a kid, was to stay curious. Because, I think all of our markets, especially including India, there's so much going on. And as far as we stay curious about a topic or multiple topics, we'll continue to learn. And as far as we continue to learn, we remain young. I think the third piece, which most of us who come from the kind of professional backgrounds that come from, I know you are an entrepreneur, so I think you've already learned this lesson early on.
The hard way.
Maybe the hard way. But many more of us who are professionals should do that, is to fail more often.
Yes.
Not to be more successful.
True.
Because many of us, and that includes me, we haven't failed enough. And I think the many times that I failed in doing little things, large things, that's where you kind of take a pause and say, yeah, what can I do better?
True.
Or what can my team do better? Or what can we as a group do better? So I think that failing piece is pretty important.
Fail often, fail faster. That's what they say.
Yeah, it's a nice little cliche, right? And it's painful.
Yeah.
But failing is important. And I think often when we don't fail is because we're not pushing the boundary. We're not challenging ourselves. We're being super safe.
Yeah.
We're sandbagging. So I think that failing piece is pretty important. The fourth lesson to me is one can be generous, especially as one earns more money with money, but one should be generous in one's time.
Yes.
And in that sense, an old boss taught me that, look, as one, in any role you're in, power really is a door open. It's not a door closed. So if you're generous with your time, with many people as you can contribute to, you'll hopefully make a difference in their life, and hopefully they'll make a difference in your life. So generosity with time is important, and perhaps the last piece is following one's passion, whatever one's passion is. That could be, art or music or food or travel or whatever it is. Because we are overly notched and overly indexed on our careers. I think following whatever makes you happy, whatever brings you sustenance, whatever fills your cup, that's important.
True.
So in my life, that's art, and that's my family. But beyond that, I think that is important to spend time on and do. So those 5 lessons in my life. From my life.
And I know you live it, Rehan, because I asked you for the podcast and you immediately said yes. So thank you for being generous with your time and giving us this opportunity to share your story and learnings. And I'll just end with one last thing. I've been to your home once and I saw this huge art collection. And you told me a little story, but I think it'll be very interesting for the audience. What are your adventures with it?
So, I don't remember the story, but and thank you, Ali, for inviting me, to your podcast. A privilege and an honor to be here. Again, art to me is like similarly. You're learning, right? You're staying curious. And I think if I look at 25 years of doing this, different genres of art, whether it's carpets or religious art or, whether it's, contemporary art, paintings, I think 8 out of 10 times, and my wife probably thinks it's 9.5 out of 10, but 8 out of 10 times I made a ton of mistakes because I don't have a model. Some people collect with focus, so they will say, well, I will collect modern or contemporary art, or I will collect painters from this particular, with this particular focus, or I'll collect travel carpets. I kind of have followed my curiosity. I want to learn about something new, and therefore I'll spend some time with the dealers, and they are real teachers because many of the dealers or gallerists that you meet really are original collectors, right? So they have an immense amount of passion for it. So they are gurus. They teach you, and so you spend time with them and you learn more. And then often when you make a mistake, you make a mistake with your savings, right? So you make a mistake with your savings, you'll remember that mistake. So yeah, I think it's about being curious and staying curious and hopefully learning a lot and having fun at the same time.
So Rehan, I mean, I really love that conversation. I thought I learned so much from it. But I want to know what's next.
So you've heard this शेर many times, right? गालिब का शेर है, हजारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले, बड़े निकले मेरे अरमां फिर भी कम निकले. So I think, look, next is still, I hope I can remain more curious, but very lucky to work in MSD, very lucky to work in India because the size of the patient population pool that one can serve, patient access, so many things in healthcare, one can make an impact as an individual and as a team. So yeah, I mean, there's tons to do and tons to learn and have a lot of fun.
So miles to go before we sleep?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I loved our conversation today. I mean, while Rehan makes it sound like lots of lotteries won, it's his humility and his passion for work that actually has got him here, I'm sure. But I think our audience is going to learn a lot from this conversation today. And I hope you had a wonderful talk today. Thank you for watching Pills in a Pod. That's Rehan Khan. That's Ali Merchant signing off for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali, for inviting me. Thank you. Thank you.